welcome. I don't know, who all we're expecting, but we'll start. And I think probably more people were joining. I was a little late myself today because it's nice out like it was yesterday. We're just talking about the walk. Perfect day for the walk for hearing, for those of you who weren't able to be there. I'm Judy Alden. I think you all, well, maybe some of you don't know me. I'm Judy Alden, president of the HLAA-DC chapter. This is a joint meeting of the DC chapter and the Montgomery County, Maryland chapter. We've done this a couple times now, and it's a wonderful opportunity, we think, when there's a common shared interest topic and speaker, like certainly Lise Hamlin is talking about public policy, that we combine these meetings. I think I will after I do a quick review of Zoom to be everybody knows how to use Zoom. I think we're zoomed out, but there's always a couple of people who may not know. So quickly we'll do Zoom, and then I'll introduce you to Wendy Chang, who will speak for the Montgomery County chapter. Mute, unmute. First of all, please mute. As much as we love your dogs and your kids and your TV, you don't need to hear all that in the background. So please mute until you're called upon to speak. That's at the bottom. There's a list. There's a row of icons, and if you click on the icon with like a speaker and put an X over it, you will be muted. Video, same row of icons. There's a video image. We really appreciate if you could be present, show yourself. Don't block out your screen or show us a waterfall somewhere. Particularly, I think for the hearing loss community, many of us read lips. I certainly do. So if you can see one another, it not only builds community and relationship, but it really helps us communicate more effectively. Captions, thank you very much to Sabrina, our captionist. At the bottom of your screen also, if you click on CC and then you click on show subtitles, I got it wrong, Russ? Click on, can't hear you, Russ, I'm sorry. I think you're muted.
No, don't do anything. Don't click on the automatic CC button.
Don't do anything.
Right.
Okay, so everyone will get the subtitles automatically. Okay, and it's card provided. It's not ASR. There's a captionist here, which is good quality.
Right.
The chat box. Our speaker, Lise Hamlin, can advise people how she prefer to handle questions. But if you have a burning question in the moment, you can use the chat box, and we'll be sure to address those by the end of today's program. And screen placement, you can move around those various boxes like subtitles. Click on it, hold it, and move it around, and you can then access the parts of the screen you'd like to. Everybody good? Any questions about using Zoom? Yes, no, good, okay, okie dokie. Let me now introduce you to Wendy Chang with the Montgomery County, Maryland HLAA chapter. Wendy?
Hi, Wendy Chang here. I hope everyone can hear me. So I'm served on a steering committee for the Montgomery County chapter, and we would like to invite people to our virtual meetings next month, November 19 at 10 a.m. We will have Linda Cosmos Spytech talking about assistive listening technology. We meet virtually on the third Saturday of the month, usually in the morning. So Lisa also asked me to encourage everybody here to send us an email to get on the mailing list, and I just realized I forgot to ask her what email address they should be using. So if somebody can drop the email address in the chat box, that would be wonderful. One thing is to be aware of, we also have a Facebook page. Information about our chapter is also in our chapter meeting is also posted on the Facebook page. So if you just look for us, Montgomery County, Maryland, HLAA chapter, you will probably find us there. And that's about all I have, I think, to add to what we need to tell you all. So, and I had a wonderful time, as Judy said, I had a wonderful time at the DC walk. yesterday. It was a gorgeous day. It was fun to walk with friends in our chapters, and it was cool. So back to you, Judy.
Thank you very much. We're neighbors, Montgomery County and DC. So, it was great to see many of you also from PG County. The whole DMV area, I think, was well represented at yesterday's walk. And it's fun. It's a fundraiser, but it's great fun. I personally am thrilled to see how multi-generational it is. I love it. My son and daughter-in-law love it. My toddler grandson loves it. It's just great to see families and friends supporting, I think, the chapters. Many of you are members of HLAA. Thank you. If you are a member, this is a little bit of a necessary communication here, but it takes support, both time and talent to support all the activities we do. Today, we're going to hear from Lise about a very important one, certainly, of advocacy and what that means to all of us. If you received Hearing Life magazine, you are a member of National. For those of you who may not be a member, I know, and I appreciate folks RSVPing on SurveyMonkey. Many of you every month have want information about chapter membership, national membership, addition to the mailing list, and we'll sort that out. And Wendy, I assure you, if it's from Montgomery County, we'll pass it along to you from the SurveyMonkey responses. But it gives us good information, and it helps us know who wants what information. But as far as membership goes, National provides many, many services and support that benefits us all. I'll post on chat the website address to join, hearingloss.org/member, and encourage you, if you're not a member, to look into that. Also, if you're not on a mailing list, DC chapter, like the Montgomery County chapter, has these monthly meetings. We'll be sure you're informed about these events. And we're increasingly, now that COVID is, I don't know what verb to use. We're not past, but we can be out and about more, hopefully. We have an exciting event coming up next month. In December, that Lisa Ewan will talk about, please. Lisa's on the DC executive board. Thanks, Lisa.
Sure. So, yeah, we were just hoping to get a group together to go to the Kennedy Center and support their efforts. They have open caption shows. So on December 18th at 2 p.m., there's a show. It's called A Soldier's Play. And we're just doing it simple. So if you want to attend, we're just asking people to buy their own tickets. I'm going to put the link to the Kennedy Center in the chat. And what you need to do is go to, there's a calendar that'll come up, and you would just click on December 18th. It says OC to designate that it's an open captioned show. And you want to make sure that you get the open caption seats, because they offer a discount from the regular price seats, and they're also in a specific section so that you'll be able to see the captions. There's a limited amount of open caption seats for each show, so if you want to go, you should probably get your tickets soon. And you can also call them. They have an accessibility department, and they can help you get the open caption seats. So I'll put the phone number and the the website link in the chat. And we hope that a lot of people will come. We might grab dinner after. That's optional. People can stay if they want, but it'll be a nice social outing. And just a note, right now, the Kennedy Center is still requiring masks indoors. So that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. It's so exciting that these events, the walk yesterday, which was great fun, in December at Kennedy Center event. It's so exciting that we have some options now to do things, to socialize face-to-face. Zoom is great, but Zoom doesn't enable hugs. So I'm looking forward to some of these face-to-face activities. Those are all the announcements I have. Anyone else have something to announce? If not, okay, if not, you'll be glad to know I'm now going to turn it over to Russ. Russ is past president of the DC chapter, and he graciously continues to arrange our monthly presentations. So Russ, over to you, please.
Thank you, Judy. I actually do have one announcement, to make. Our next program, that is to say the DC chapter's next program, has been rescheduled. It will be held on the 4th of December. And it will feature as our speaker, Gail Lynn. Some of you may know Gail. Gail is an audiologist in the DC area. And she is basically volunteered to answer any questions you may have. So this will be a very interactive event in which you can ask whatever is on your mind, and she will attempt to answer it. She's very, very good. Okay, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Lise Hamlin. Many of you already know Lisa, but for those of you who don't, she is HLAA's Director of Public Policy, working out of the association's national headquarter office in Rockville. Lisa joined the HLAA national staff in 2008. Prior relevant experience includes working with the League for the Hard of Hearing in New York City and the Northern Virginia Resource Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Persons, NVRC, in Fairfax, Virginia. I talked to Lisa for a moment or two, before we started. She asked that you hold questions, until the end. Of course, the exception being, as Judy mentioned, if you have a burning question, that is particularly that's interfering with your understanding of the presentation, put that in the chat box and we'll try to get to that right away. You can also, if you wish, put questions as they occur to you in the chat box, so that you remember exactly, what it was that you had in mind and where it was in the presentation. And we will go through all of the questions in the chat box, and ask Lise Hamlin to address them, after she finishes with her presentation. And that's all for me. And I want to again welcome Lisa, say thank you for coming, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Russ, Judy, and Wendy, and nice to see everybody. I know it's a beautiful day outside, so I'm pleased that anybody is here today. You might want to be outside rather than here. But I hope that I will give you some information that is helpful to you and that lets you know what we're doing in the national office. Now I'm going to switch to screen sharing, and it looks like I lose my captions at that point. So it'll be harder for me to understand what's going on. So that's another reason why we should wait until after I do the presentation before we take questions. So let's see what happens. It was a little glitchy this morning. Let's see if we can get this. Here we go. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So for me, it's kind of blinking on and off, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen for you. I'm going to try one more thing to see if we can get it onto presenter mode. Well, it doesn't seem to want to do that. So I'll just go forward with this. So let me start and see if it'll move forward. There we go. Okay, this is the new HLAA office. Some of you may have been in the Rockville office. We moved last summer. summer before. I'm not sure because it was during COVID and I still have not been going as often. Russ, are you wanting to say something?
No, I'm just looking to see that, okay. That's showing up now. I hope that
Okay.
works. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Okay, there's this slide. You're seeing the slide of the office. Yes, good. Okay, so it seems to be working a little glitchy again today. I rebooted, but sometimes technology doesn't want to cooperate. And I am getting captions, so that's good too. So this is our new office. We have a loop around we have a desk loop, so people coming in can hear what's going on if they have a telecoil. And then our meeting room, which this is obviously not a picture of, but we also have a high-tech meeting room. And many of people here know Joe Duarte, who was the one who installed it. And we got a donation of money to make it really pretty up to date there with screens, and it's looped. So it's a good place for us to meet, but it's a little small for larger meetings. So we don't meet there as a chapter, but we do have meetings for staff and board. And for people who are not familiar with it, the mission of HLAA is to open the world of communication to people with hearing loss by providing information, education, support, and advocacy. So this is our board. Our structure is that we have governance by a board of directors. And Barbara Kelly, who's executive director, sits on the board as the ex officio, but Kevin Frank is the chair at this time. And you can see the other folks on. Our newest member is Ira Rubenstein, who several of you might know as well. He was part of the walk in DC and he raised a really good amount of money. This is our staff and some of our consultants. So we are not huge, but we have a good number of people these days who are helping us out on various projects. And of course, the full-time staff that are working on different areas, different departments. We have lots of chapters across the country. COVID was really hard on some of our chapters. Now, Montgomery County and DC went right into Zoom chapters, which was great. And some of the other chapters that had some tech people involved also did that. But for some of our chapters, it was tough. So Baltimore chapter, for example, is still struggling. And some of them around the country are trying to figure out if they can meet in person. And some of us, we were discussing this locally about, well, maybe there was advantages to staying on Zoom. So it depends on who you are and what's going on with your chapter about how we meet. But we do still have chapters all over the country. And the Veterans Across America chapter was always set up as a virtual chapter. They always reached out to the whole country in terms of what veterans would be involved. This picture was at one of our conventions. So if you know veterans, you could support that. You can get a hold of Carla Byer-Smolin, who is our chapter person. And if somebody is a veteran who would like to get more involved, we would love to have their input. But I'm going to talk about public policy today. That's my focus. That's what I do all day long, sometimes more than 7 days a week, it seems like. But certainly that's where I spend my time with this organization. And one of the things, the reason I put this picture up is it's really this is a group, the FCC Disability Advisory Committee is a group that really is works hard to find access for people with hearing loss, people with vision loss. Those are the sensory disabilities are the ones. Remember, the FCC deals with telecommunications, so they're looking at people to provide access for people with sensory or visual disabilities. The board here is comprised, not the board, it's a PACA, it's a federal advisory committee. So these people are also represent industry. They represent some state and local governments. We have ex officios from, for example, the Access Board and the FCC Disability Rights Office sits on this committee. So they are really the ones who manage it. And it's actually done a lot of good, and it's also been a really good conduit of information between what consumers are experiencing and what the FCC needs information about. Because what they have, they know the law, they know how to make sure the law is working, but what they don't know is consumer experience. And I will say this, and I might say it a couple of times, is the one thing we're really missing from consumers is complaints. So the FCC will tell us, well, you know, it must be going okay. Industry will say the same thing. Things must be okay. We're not hearing any complaints. And there are things people do complain. When spam calls were coming through, they get a lot of complaints from all kinds of people across the country. But people with disabilities seem to hesitate to send in complaints. So I would encourage anybody, even if you're not sure it's the right agency, they'll send you the right place. If you're not sure their complaint is covered under the law, they will also let you know if that's not happening. But it gives them a sense of what's going on in the world. So again, please complain if there's anything to complain about. You can also give them a compliment. They'll be happy to receive compliments too. If there's something going really well, you can let them know. So legislation, we don't spend a lot of time with legislation. I tend to spend most of my time, and now I have an associate, Brian Meyer, who is helping out as well. And most of our time is spent working with regulators, FCC, DOT, TSA, all the alphabet soup. We're there to work with federal agencies to let them know when they're writing the regs, how they should look at it, with the perspective of someone with hearing loss. But we do sometimes get involved with legislation when it looks like there's something that's going to impact us. So, for example, the over-the-counter hearing aids was something that we worked with, and I'll talk more about OTC hearing aids in a bit. But as part of legislation, we were there right from the beginning. We were working the halls of Congress, which I found frustrating at times, but it actually worked, and we got the law passed. It was actually a bipartisan, bicameral kind of vote that took place, which is certainly unusual these days. But it worked, and we got that passed. So that was one of the things was a success for us that we worked on. Not so much of a success was the Medicare coverage of hearing aids, which we really wanted to see happen, and we got very close this time. It was part of, it passed the House. So the House's version of the Build Back Better Act did include Medicare coverage of hearing aids. But we all know that Build Back Better didn't really go as far as we wanted it to do. If they had passed it, we would have been there. It would have been a breakthrough for getting Medicare coverage. We will not stop. We'll continue to work on Medicare coverage. There are individuals, Representative Debbie Dingell, often almost every Congress puts forward a bill that says, hey, this has got to change. So we'll be working it with whatever legislators are working on it, and in whatever vehicles that we can get it passed. We'll continue to chip away at it. It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy, but we have things that's really important for people with hearing loss. So there is a new bill that's out there that's just been dropped on the Website and Software Accessibility Act. This is dropped on the Senate side by Senator Tammy Duckworth. So it's Senate Bill 4999. She does have a companion bill, but it hasn't dropped yet. So I don't have a number for the sponsor was Senate, Representative Sarbanes, but it hasn't dropped. So I don't have a number yet, but you can look for it soon. Whether or not it will pass this year, probably not, but it's a setup. Having introduced the bill, now we're going to be good to go for the next session of Congress. And we're going to be working on yet another bill that I can't even reveal yet, because the senator who's dropping the bill wants, of course, to get the news out when he's ready. But it will cover internet access for people with vision, so it's people with sensory disabilities. So we'll look again at the same things that the FCC looks at under the CBAA, which is the Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010, looking at some of the same issues, some of the gaps that CBAA did not cover, and taking it one step farther so that we have more access to, particularly internet access to, having captions there. So that will be soon, and we'll send out news when it happens. We'd like to get a lot of sponsors. So if anybody's interested in that, please let me know. And we will, as I say, if you're signed up for our e-news, and by that I mean the HLAA e-news, you'll get something on that. We also put it out by social media, Facebook, and I don't know if we have Instagram, but we certainly have Twitter. So we'll push them out, and you can get news that way, but you can also contact me directly. Okay, so again, most of what we do is working with regulators. And when we do, I spend a lot of time with the FCC because it covers many of the issues that we face. One of the things we're working on right now is the hearing aid compatibility task force. I probably covered this last year because it's taken several years to put together. We're coming to a point where we'll be writing a report to send to the FCC and advise them on how we think now, we being industry, or with hearing aid compatibility, we're talking compatibility with cell phones. So this is wireless phones, not the handset, not the old ones that sat on your desk, the old mobile phones, not those, and not the newer ones that sit on your desk. This is only wireless we're talking about with this particular committee. And we want to make sure they're accessible, and we want to give the FCC heads up on what it is that's important to consumers and important to industry to keep going forward on accessibility. Right now, most of the carriers and the manufacturers, I believe, are almost at 99%, have reached 99% of hearing aid compatibility. Really close. Some of the smaller ones haven't. Some of the smaller providers, the carriers who are in small towns, tend to get older phones, so they may not be that close to providing fully accessible phones, but they're pretty close. The benchmarks now have reached 85%. So 85% of everything that's offered should be hearing aid compatible by the FCC's rules. So they're going above and beyond that, which is really good to hear. But the standard is changing, which makes the way they test it a little different. It's harder going forward. Many of you may have remembered that we had M3 and M4, or T3 and T4, as you would look on the box, so you'd see if your phone had those ratings, and then you knew they were pretty good for accessibility in terms of the microphone or the telecoil access. Well, they've changed that now, so that what's happening is it's going to be pass or fail. You either have a phone that is accessible or you don't. So when you look at boxes, and this is going to start in 2023, that's what you're going to be looking at. But the ratings together, it's pass and fail. And we agreed to that based on the fact that it's harder to pass than it was in the past. So hopefully these phones will be better, both on microphone and telecoil. And then with this committee, we're looking at a third thing, which is that Bluetooth has come on like gangbusters. Lots of people use Bluetooth, lots of people love it, and I have to include myself among them. The connectivity is just so much better than using, certainly than for me, with a significant hearing loss, using it with on the microphone mode, or it says I'd use it on microphone, that was terrible, or putting it in front of me and being able to use it both ears was a little better. But the telecoil always found problematic with my phone, which was a shame, but that's the way it was. So Bluetooth is the manufacturers of hearing aids and the manufacturers of wireless devices. Those guys all know that people prefer Bluetooth, and that's the direction things are heading in. So we're going to be talking to the FCC about, well, where does that fit? How do you define hearing aid compatible phones? Do you want Bluetooth to be there as well? So we're working on it. By the end of the year, we should have a consensus. We're very close now. We're drafting a report. I think we'll be together on something to recommend. I don't exactly know what it'll be yet, but stay tuned. That'll be coming at the end of the year. Now, we do also watch what's going on with captioning, television and internet captioning that the law covers now. So for example, right now under CBAA, if you have programming that started on television and was broadcast with captions, when it moved to the internet, that had to be captioned at least as well, if not better, than the original captioning. The problem is that worked really well. We thought this was great back in 2010, but 10 years later, over 10 years later, there's a lot of original programming. YouTube, which was specifically excluded from CBAA, is now producing so much, and they don't have to, under the rules, provide captioning. Some of them do. You do see both internet and YouTube that is captioned, but it's not a slam dunk. We don't know for sure. And there's some rules that we still have to look at. So we're looking at some of those. We also will keep track. Live captioning on news is problematic. There's been a movement, just like with Zoom captioning, where there's been a lot of automatic or other video platforms have automatic captioning. Television is going that direction, particularly for live news, which is sometimes good, sometimes not so good. One of the things that automatic caption does really well is keep up. So it's fast. It doesn't hold on to the signal in a way that was happening with live captioners on television, because first of all, there's no way there wouldn't be a little bit of a delay because somebody has to hear and type in. But the second thing is some of the ways technically it went from the captioner through the phone to the broadcaster to the home was problematic, and the delay kept building on itself. So automatic captions are much better at that. They pump them out very quickly. However, their accuracy is just not as good. And there's sometimes that if they have an emergency, for example, or if they're switching to weather, which is not scripted, it's more problematic for some stations. So we just recently put out a survey. I don't know if anybody here took it or saw it. We did an emergency captioning survey, say what's happening, what are you remembering? It's emergency captioning is a little tougher to survey on because hopefully emergencies don't happen very often, at least, not so often that it sticks in your brain. But I was actually pleased to find out that a lot of people's memory, what they did remember, and this was across the country, this wasn't just in this area, was that most of the captioning was doing pretty well, that they could understand emergency caption. They don't remember having a problem. They remember it being available and understandable and usable. That does not mean everything was perfect. There were plenty of people also, over half of the people reported that they were doing well. But was 40% of people said, well, no, either they don't show up, they're not in the right place, like some piece of information is hiding them, or the captions are hiding some piece of information that's important. When you're in an emergency, you want as much information as possible. So either that was happening, placement, it wasn't completely captioned, or they had some other problem with it. So again, the FCC takes this very seriously, so much so that they had a special, the reason I did the survey is I went on a panel with the FCC, for the FCC, with other members of industry. And I was happy to be able to give them a pat on the back for what they did good, but they still have to work on making sure that emergency captioning is pretty near perfect. And the FCC takes that very, very seriously. So if you absolutely have a complaint, it's a real complaint, if it's something you can, the biggest problem with complaining about captioning is it's hard to know how much you're missing or what's accurate. If you're the only person in your home and you're hard of hearing, how do you figure out how bad it is? Sometimes you can guess because it's really often left field, but if it's only off by a little bit, it's really hard to tell. So still, if you have a complaint, send it in and let them figure it out, because if it happens, if you send in the complaint close to the time that it happened, they can go back and get the tapes from the TV station and find out, well, what went on? Where did the problem happen? Was there a problem? So that's my plug for filing complaints. And finally, we're still very much involved with working on IPCTS, which is Internet Protocol Caption Telephone Services under the TRS system. The FCC has oversight. A lot of IPCTS is moving toward automatic captions. And I have to say the FCC really pushed the providers to do that. And what they've had previously really uses automatic captions, but it uses it with human intervention. So what would happen is you'd call on an IPCTS phone, it would go to a caller assistant who would then use a system like Dragon, where they would revoice into it, and what the text was came out of her revoicing because she trained Dragon to her voice. And I say she because it was mostly women, though there were some guys too. But whenever they trained their voice, and that way they reduced the number of errors that it was just happening automatically. Well, it's true that automatic captioning has gotten much, much better than when it first started with IPCTS, but it's still not there yet. Now, however, the FCC is not setting standards, has not. We have pushed for a number of years now to get the FCC make some kind of minimal standards that everybody has to come up to. And then if they do better, they can say, hey, we're doing best, but we're not there. The FCC is happy that automatic captions are out there because it makes it more available to more people. Again, if you don't like it, let the FCC know. Other advocacy work we're doing is we're looking at accessible healthcare. We have a committee on healthcare now, and telehealth, which I have to admit is a bug for me because during COVID, of course, you don't want to see your doctor, right? So you don't want to go into the office if you don't have to. So I had several telehealth conversations with my primary care provider. And it turned out that the nurse practitioner had a heavy Eastern European accent, which was really hard for me to understand. So it's like going back and forth and back and forth. If I'd had captions, it would have been much easier, much faster conversation. So we're looking at that. We're looking at how we can impress upon the whole ecosystem of healthcare that if they're going to provide, and frankly, I don't think telehealth is going away. The emergency rules that were put in place to allow more people to be able to bill for telehealth conversations. It used to be very narrow, but now everybody's using it. Everybody wants it. I think it's going to be extended. The emergency, as I was saying, the emergency ruling that HHS put out, Health and Human Services put out, was extended till October, and it now looks to be extended into January. But after that, Congress is going to have to act to say, it's time, just use telehealth. Let's figure out how to make it work. And one of the ways we're going to be there to watch is to make sure it's accessible. We also have an employment access committee. You may have seen some of our webinars. We will continue to provide as much information as possible for people in the workplace, because we do still hear of discrimination in the workplace. It still happens. And of course, we always promote greater access to hearing assistive technology in public places. We have the Hearing Loop Committee, which works on it specifically for loops, but we look across the board, whatever listening system or whatever accessibility cart, whatever is needed should be available in public places. And then I just wanted to mention one other thing that we're working on, which is ICAT, which is the Industry Consumer Alliance for Accessible Technology. Now that's going to be happening through our website. So we have a portal that will be a page. It will look pretty much like everything else on our website, but it'll allow you to go in. We'll have discussion boards to talk about technology. We'll have user stories. We'll have ways for industry to connect with users. So they're making a new product, for example, and they need to know, well, how will this actually work for people with hearing loss? So they could go on the discussion board, or they could recruit people to be part of a beta testing or focus group. So we want to see that interaction happen. We've had a lot of very positive feedback, both from industry and consumers who like to be part of this. So we're very excited about it and feeling very positive about going forward. We believe that should be opening soon, but every time I say it, it gets delayed again. So we will let you know again through our e-news and our social media when that goes live, and hopefully sometime soon. Now, I promised I would spend some time talking about over-the-counter hearing aids because it's big in the news, and because as of tomorrow, they will become legally available. Over-the-counter hearing aids will be available to consumers who have a mild to adults who have a mild to moderate hearing loss without a prescription, without going to an audiologist or a dispenser, just online in a big box store, in a pharmacy. So we're expecting that to shake things up a little. We'll see. But let me go back to the beginning. This book is still available on the website for the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, NASEM. The recommendation number 7 was the one that looked at over-the-counter hearing aids, but they had 12 recommendations. So there's a whole lot in this book. It talks about how adults have not been getting the hearing health care that they should be getting. And the reason they came up with recommendation number 7 is that in their research, they found that only about 20% of the people who could use hearing aids have them. I've also since learned that for cochlear implants, for example, worldwide, only 5% of the people who can use cochlear implants get them. So we really are behind. We really need different ways to shake up the market, to reach out to people, to have people understand that they can do something about their hearing loss and treat it. So after the report, there was another report on the President's Commission also reported, but this NASEM report really was well-researched and fact-based and has a lot of references to look to so that you could go back and check out what they did that really pushed the legislation. Then Senators Warren and Grassley were the ones who were the main catalysts to make it happen on the Senate side. I'm forgetting who did it on the House side, that everybody jumped on board. It was really not terribly. There were a couple of people who were, some of the members of Congress who were a little worried about certain aspects of it, and some of the industry was not happy with it at first. So the hearing aid industry did put some roadblocks up. And some of the audiologists were not sure at first, although after a while they came on board too. Because the truth of the matter for both of them, there's no reason why a hearing aid company, an established hearing aid company, cannot make a low-end over-the-counter product. So in the end, for them, that's going to work for them. Also, an audiologist, and you said Gail Lynn was coming next month. She was among the audiologists who said she would be open to providing services for over-the-counter, and that'd be one of the low-end products. And then she has a range of products for whoever needs them. And again, this product is for mild to moderate hearing loss. So it's not for everybody. It's probably not for most people in this webinar, but it is for people who put off dealing with their hearing loss because, it's like a big deal. It's like, how do I find the right audiologist or dispenser? Am I going to get ripped off? How do I find that person that I can trust? 2, it's a lot of money, for sure. Traditional hearing aids cost a lot of money, no question. And 3, some people put it off, and I hate to say it, but it's still true that there is stigma in the world about hearing loss. People don't want to feel that they have a disability or that they're aging into a disability, either one. So there is that to battle as well. But we think that this should shake up the market a little bit. We'll see. So the law was passed and signed in 2017. And that's the correct number. I put earlier on the slides, if I give this out, I'm happy to share them, but I'll have to correct the number. It's not 2018, it's 2017. We supported it. We knocked on doors of Congress. We moved forward with the legislation with everybody. And I have to say, Senator Warren's office was wonderful. Her staffers were terrific and helped shepherd this along the way. And afterward, both Senators Warren and Grassley really pushed the FDA to come out with the rules, because they were supposed to come out with the rules quickly, and they did not. They were dragging their feet. So they actually wrote a report that they sent forward to give to the FDA as well, and to let Congress know that the FDA and Congress is watching. So we were there with it, right through the whole thing. And then when the rules finally did come out last, was October of last year, we provided comments, and the final rule was put together this year. It was released this year in August. So it's ready, and now, as I say, it was released in August, and it's active. So people tomorrow, literally the 17th of October, is when people can start selling over-the-counter hearing aids. So these, again, I want to emphasize that it's not for everybody. It's not for children. These things are not to be bought for children. And I know it's going to be a tough one because I know parents struggle with the cost of hearing aids, but this is not for them. It's also for people who perceive, and that perceived was intentional. You shouldn't have to go to an audiologist. You can, if you believe you have a mild to moderate hearing loss, that's enough. Now, you may want to, there's going to be some online testing. We'll see more of those testing. You could see if you could find an audiologist who would just, or a hearing instrument specialist who would be willing to be paid just for the evaluation. You could go that route. Or you could try hearing aid, try an over-the-counter hearing aid, see if you liked it, if it worked for you, or if it wasn't what you were looking for. And then maybe go afterward to get a hearing aid evaluation. Any of the progress, it's up to the individual. And that's really the important thing for me. It empowers the individual. But it does another thing, which means you have to take responsibility for yourself. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to get a cheap hearing aid, I'll just buy whatever. You have to do your own research. You have to do your due diligence. You have to make sure these people aren't fly by night. You also have to make sure that it works for you. So things like return policies are going to be very important to look at. But it's up to you. It's one of the last areas where the old medical model of disability is still in place for hearing aids. And this will shake that up. But we need consumer education. You have to take responsibility for yourself. So what have we done? How have we helped people to take responsibility for themselves? Well, the first thing we did was we created a tip sheet. I have a URL there, but you can go to hearingloss.org and OTC hearing aids. You can just do a web search doing that, and you'll end up on this page. So our tip sheet takes a look at things like who does the hearing aid benefit? Who are these people who have mild to moderate hearing loss? What kind of questions should somebody be asking if they're going to buy one? Where to file a complaint, because we think it's important, because this is, again, I just told you that most of the federal regulators want to know what's going on. They know what's going on, what they think is going on. They know what people tell them. It's really good to get people spending in information from across the country. So filing a complaint is a good thing, even if, in this case, the FDA doesn't do a lot of enforcement. You can go to the FTC for enforcement, but I want the FDA to know that either it's working or it's not working, and how it's working or not working. What ways were there any surprises? In fact, we just had a meeting recently with the FDA, and the first question was, what are you hearing from people? So they want to know. They've worked hard on these rules. Now they want to know what's going on. So we can help them by telling them. Some of the questions that we put up that we're looking to help people ask is looking at the free trial period or money back or return policy. And we, HLAA, in our comments said to the FDA, you shouldn't just ask, you shouldn't just require them to put something on their box. You should require that there is a return policy. But the FDA did not go there. They will not require the policy, but they did require that if there is a return policy, you must publish it and let people know what it is. If you see nothing on the box, it probably isn't one. You should always ask, because you just don't know if this product's going to work. Another thing that we thought was important was whether or not you need a smartphone. Not everybody has a smartphone. And if you're going low end, maybe you don't want to have a smartphone to work with this. So But if you don't want to buy a product and find out later you needed a smartphone just to make it work. So that's an important question that we think people should be asking when they purchase these devices. Is it compatible with cell phones or smartphones? So can I bring it to my ear? Will it have, some of them may have telecoils. I kind of suspect that because these are low-end products, we may not see a lot of Bluetooth and telecoil, but we just don't know yet. So maybe they will be. Everything's getting smaller, we know that, but we also know that they're having some production problems with chips. So it'll be real interesting to see what comes out sooner. And we're kind of expecting like a 2-year period where things will be thrown out there. And then the dust will settle and we'll begin to see the really good products that have some staying power and have market appeal as well. We're also seeing we're seeing Sony's jumping in, Boys has jumped in. Both of those are partnering with other companies that already make hearing aids to bring the consumer aspect to it. There are other companies that will look at this as a consumer product, and that there are 80% of the people with hearing loss don't have anything. Maybe they can provide something. And you look at, for example, like an Apple AirPod. Now, those don't look like hearing aids, and I would venture a guess that Apple will never call them a hearing aid. And yet they have some functionalities that work like a hearing aid. Maybe that's enough. Those are the kinds of things we're looking, not just for cost changes and not just for ease of finding it on the internet or wherever you go, Costco or Walmart or Walgreens, wherever you go, you can find them. Those are big. I think access to the products is going to make a difference. But it's also innovation. Why do they have to look like a hearing aid? If it works, then it should, it's a different form factor. If people think it's more groovy to have an airport pod than a hearing aid, let them have it, whatever works. These people need access to communication. So we want to see more of that happen, and I think we will. But again, we have to see how the market shapes out. Is there the demand that we hope there will be? More questions that people should ask is, can the amplification be adjusted? Some of the products will come out with 3, for example, just as an example, 3 presets. You can have a noisy situation in your regular situation, and then when it's quiet, something or music, whatever. They might have presets like that rather than a wheel that turns it up and down. Do you need that? Do you want it? Which way would you rather have it? Would you like to just leave it on all day at the same setting? Does that work? Does it tell you? Now, this is not something you'd find by trying it on necessarily, unless you knew about this, but the feedback control, you might want to look at the specs. What do they do about feedback? You and I know that with more severe hearing loss and the earmuffs, we have to get to a point where we know the whistling sound always means there's feedback. But the hearing aids have come much better more recently about controlling that, finding ways around, finding technical ways so that you don't hear that whistling all the time. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with that in over-the-counter products, but it's a question to ask. For some people also, whether it's water resistant or sweat resistant is a problem. There are people who go through hearing aids regularly because they're very sweaty people. So having some kind of water resistance is really helpful for them. And then the battery. Was it a rechargeable? There's been a big movement toward rechargeable. People like rechargeable hearing aids. Again, when you have a low-end product, you're going to have to give up something. And what they give up may be the rechargeable, but I don't know yet. We'll have to see. So just to wrap this up, to conclude this is the real message, is that if people ask you about it, you know somebody who is thinking about it, now, first, they have to be an adult over 18. They have to have mild to moderate hearing loss, at least as far as they can tell, and what they believe to have mild to moderate hearing loss. Not for people like me with really significant hearing loss, but it's not for children. And always keep your antenna up. Always buyer beware. When new products come up, when the market changes and gets disrupted, there's going to be fly-by-night companies. There are going to be some people who are not great. There are going to be people. But I have to tell you, that was happening before. 2 years ago, I had an intern who did some research online and found out that Walmart, I think it was Walmart, was selling what they called a hearing aid for $25. Now, you know, if somebody told me they bought something for $25 and it didn't work, I would say, gee, really? I'm not surprised. So you have to always have a certain amount of skepticism. If you're going to be the one taking control, make sure that you're skeptical. But we're going to see, I believe we're going to see more help than we've ever had before either. There's been a huge media input on this. There's lots of media who are interested in this across the country. We're going to see Consumer Reports, Wirecutter, New York Times Wirecutter, and Hearing Tracker are just three that I know about. I'm sure there are going to be others who jump in and say, yeah, let's compare them so that we give the consumer some information and give them a leg up on trying to find out which over-the-counter product to use. And I also tell everyone all the time, they can always talk to a hearing healthcare professional. It's going to be important for some people. I think if your first hearing aid is when you're 90 years old, you know, you may not want to do it alone. But if you're, you know, if you're in working age or even younger, you're in college, you know, you're tech savvy enough, you can work on this. And if you have the time, you just have to put the interest and the time behind making sure you're getting a product that works for you. So this is me. You can get in contact with me. And I am happy to take any questions you have.
Excuse me, Lisa. Thank you. I'm taking a look at, I wanted to look at the chat box, but it seems to have disappeared. Judy, do you have the chat box in front of you? I don't quite know why. Chat. Oh,
I
in here.
don't see questions. There's some input about web addresses,
Okay.
but I wasn't tracking it real time, Russ, but I don't see questions.
Okay. Well,
I mean, if we need questions, I
yeah,
always
questions too.
questions.
I say, yeah. Let me do a couple things. First of all, you know, Lisa, you started off making a request, which I've heard before, that people complain, and I understand it completely, because I've been in situations where occasionally I've offered a complaint, you know, cart didn't work well, captions didn't work well, or was some other difficulty, you know, with technology, and say, oh, that's odd. We've been doing this for years and no one has ever complained before. And certainly if that's the case, and I suspect it probably is, you're not going to get an awful lot of, you know, attention to, you know, to what the difficulty is. But I have to assume that why do people not complain? Well, I suspect they may not complain because they don't really feel, you know, I mean, they have a suspicion that there's really not somebody, you know, who's really terribly interested at the other end of the line. Or the problem of submitting a complaint is not necessarily an easy process. I'm wondering, you know, there are the ADA as regional offices. Can they be helpful, you know, in determining whether or not particular complaints, you know, are, you know, justifiable, or, you know, that they have, you know, I mean, they're likely to, you know, be important, you know, and, you know, consistent with the disability, with the legislation. Can they be helpful in the process of submitting complaints? Who do you complain to? Where do you get necessary forms? And, you know, the whole gamut. Is that a good source of information, you know, on submitting complaints? Because I think this is important and people don't do it.
I think it is a good source because, again, most agencies, if your complaint doesn't have to do with what they do, they'll tell you. And they'll say, instead of sending it to me, you should send it to the FCC or DOT, TSA, whatever it is. They will help. So the regional centers are available. What they're there is for providing education and information specifically about the ADA, but they would certainly, I think, lead people to the right place. So that's not a bad idea to go there. I think you're right that people often don't complain because they're not convinced anything good's going to happen if they do. Am I going to spend my time, fill out this huge form and then nobody cares. But I would encourage people to do it because I think people do care. They may not actually solve the problem in the way you want, but they will take the information and maybe solve it in the way you want, but also take the information and say, we're seeing this problem. And if they begin to see a lot of it, then they can do something about it.
And you have your hand up with the question. Do you want to tell us, or tell Lisa in particular, what your question is? Ken may not be with us, at the moment.
Yes, no, Russ, I am with us now.
So,
I apologize. I was on the road previously, but now I'm home. Lisa, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative. Lots of great information. I'm actually have Senator Duckworth's summary of her bill on my computer as we speak. So I'm very excited to learn more about that. I do have a question and a concern actually regarding accessibility and connectivity for hearing instruments and Bluetooth and new technologies that are coming out like broadcast Bluetooth. My concern specifically is about Apple and the iPhone. Now, a lot of hearing instruments, specifically, cochlear implants and hearing aids, Apple, you can only connect to the iPhone and the iPad. You can't, but their iPods, they can connect iPhone, iPad, computer, TV. So their iPods have that capability, but for some reason, the hearing instruments don't have that universal connectivity option. And my concern is, as Apple comes out and with their over-the-counter hearing aid version of the iPod, are they going to competitively limit connectivity to their competitors?
Okay, so I thought you were going to go in a different direction. So the AirPods, yeah, Apple does that. It creates its own little gilded jail there, and everybody stays in its own world. That's their thing. But I have what I think will be good news for people who are Apple aficionados, is that going forward, we're going to see connectivity a little bit different. I don't know where the airports are going to go, but the phones are going to be able to connect more readily by Bluetooth to more different, have better connectivity. So you don't have to have a made for Apple hearing aid in order to connect to the Bluetooth in the iPhone going forward. And it's going to happen relatively soon. There's a new hearing access profile. It's going to be in the hearing aid. And the new version of Bluetooth, which is called Auracast, is going to be universally, so it's not proprietary. And it looks like, and again, it's hard to predict the future, particularly with Apple, who likes to keep things close to the vest. I'm thinking what I'm seeing from the hearing aid compatibility board is a lot of, everybody's moving in the same direction. We want to see everybody have access to the same thing, same profile. So I think in terms of that kind of connectivity, we will be doing well going forward. AirPod, I'm just not sure about, that's what you started with the question, will it just be from, could be, it might happen. And I think we'll have a lot of different options. It won't just be the Apple world, there'll be a lot of options with different products that will connect to different things.
Well, that is exciting news indeed. Thank you.
Unmute myself. There we go. Other questions? Okay, I don't see any, but let me ask another if I might.
All right.
For years now, there have been products on the market which collectively we refer to as personal sound amplification products. The technology in some respects is similar to that of hearing aids, but they cannot be sold as hearing aids legally. That said, some of them are quite inexpensive. And although they can't be sold as hearing aids, I suspect there are probably people who are buying them who have a hearing loss and buying them for that reason. Now, with the advent, of over-the-counter hearing loss, over-the-counter hearing aids, which will be legally regulated, I'm wondering how people, well, let me put it this way. You referred to the $25 device. And yes, I mean, people should be sensible enough to recognize that if you pay $25 for a device, you're getting very little, and it could even be dangerous. It could over amplify, or it could do a variety of other things, which are dangerous. But as a class, I think you're going to get people who say, well, okay, over-the-counter hearing aids are certainly less expensive than those, prescribed by audiologists. And I have a perceived mild to moderate hearing loss. I don't need to go to an audiologist. Why should I spend the money for an over-the-counter hearing aid? Why don't I get a PSAP, which is probably even less expensive? And I'm wondering how people are going to make the distinction and recognize that one is a preferable thing and can be very useful, and the other may not be.
Okay, so first off, the first thing you should know is that the FDA is requiring packaging that says, if it's an over-the-counter product, it must say OTC on it, over-the-counter. It must identify itself. And those products have gone through a process of registering with the FDA. So we know that that's that. We also know that they consider PSAPs, these personal sound amplification devices, as consumer products. They are not considered hearing aids, and they are not for people with hearing loss and should not be marketed to people with hearing loss. Nor should that $25 hearing aid that was in Walmart. So some of this has to do with chasing people. So filing a complaint with the FDA, or more likely, again, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and say, these guys are not selling a product that is they're not selling it either in a way, they're marketing it to people with hearing loss if it's a PSAP, and they should not. Or they're selling it in a way that's false advertising. So that's one thing. The other thing I think that's going to happen is that more people are going to, some of these products that are called PSAPs now, the history of that was that there were members of manufacturers who thought they didn't really want to make a hearing aid. They wanted to make a low-end product, and they tried to convince the FDA to create this PSAP name, but there are actually standards for PSAPs. So if they meet standards, they can have a really reasonable product. I suspect some of these products are going to move over to OTC, because PSAPs are still going to be seen as a stepchild, even though there are standards. And if you fulfill those standards, you can have quite a good PSAP. So it's a tough call. It's going to be a little messy for a while. As I say, again, I was just listening to Franklin the other day talk about it taking about 2 years, he suspects, for the dust to settle. But that's what we're looking at now. And there are guidelines now. You can take a look at them for the new guidelines for PSAPs that are up on the FDA website if you want to take a deeper dive into that.
Just to follow up, am I correct in saying that the real distinction and the advantage of going with an OTC hearing aid as opposed to a PSAP is the fact that the former, the OTC hearing aids are regulated and there is some assurance therefore that they meet certain quality standards and they are safe. You know, and you may be paying a little bit more, I don't know, but yes, and certainly some of the PSAPs I assume are just actually pretty good and probably will qualify as OTC hearing. But that's, I mean, am I correct in saying that the major advantage of the OTC is that you get a certain assurance that they are regulated, that they are safe, that they're really made for you and people like you, as opposed to, you know, a pretty Wild West open the market over, you know, with PSAPs, you know, which are not quite regulated in the same way. Is that correct?
Right. So yeah, so PSAPs are not regulated at all. Over this counter there are specific rules and standards and ways to limit the volume and limit the output rather. So there are specific technical pieces of the regulations that the manufacturers must come up to speed with. And if they violate them, again, even though consumers don't complain, what happens is the competitors do complain. So it's possible if somebody's really being a bad actor, one of the competitors will say, these guys are not following the rules and you ought to chase them, FDA or FTC. That's the more likely thing that will happen. And then some of those, again, will be weeded out. Some of them will say, oh, we didn't mean that, and come up to speed. We'll see. We'll just see how much the market will bear. But yeah, you're not the first one who used the term Wild West. There are some worries about it being a Wild West out there.
Thank you. Judy, you have a question in the chat, an entry in the chat box. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure, thank you. I recently, this is driven, I guess, in my mind, I recently saw an article by Hearing Tracker and Hearing Tracker, and they mapped 2023 industry space, and it's a labyrinth. You know, the Boseys are partnering with the little guys, the Sonys, or all these relationships and the kinds of category of hearing devices extrapolated in the 6 or so years that I've been involved. So I guess my question with HLAA, I guess my question is, most people I meet, like this group is probably typical, have moderate to severe, maybe profound hearing loss. How does HLAA-DC positioning itself with this over-the-counter explosion? Who knows if it'll be an explosion, but over-the-counter opportunity. And part of that question also is, I think, with technology as a driver, is over-the-counter unique to the United States, or is it a global phenomenon?
Whether it's global or not, over-the-counter is an American law. It's a U.S. law. So I don't see that. The information I've had, and I don't have information everywhere, but from what I've seen, this is not happening in other places. That don't quote me on that. I don't know if there are places that are now opening up to over-the-counter. I can tell you that, I think that it will have impact on the traditional aids that you and I depend on. They're now calling them prescription hearing aids. They don't need a doctor to prescribe them. You can just get them at the same place as you always did. But these aids, there's just a distinction between over-the-counter and the traditional aids. So these prescription aids, I think, will benefit from all of the innovation that's going on over the counter. Some things will be transferable. Some things won't, because when you make a power aid, you have to do different things. But some things will, and chips are getting smaller, and there'll be more information packed in them, and we'll begin to see what. I think one of the best things that will come of this is that it'll be much more consumer oriented. The traditional way to sell aids is to sell it to an audiologist or an instrument specialist. That's the audience, instead of you and me, instead of the end user. Once you shift it to a consumer market, then you begin to see, well, what do people really want from their hearing aid? What do they want from this communication? You know, we've been suspecting, we're not just trying to make things easy for the professional to fit. We're trying to make them good and workable devices for the people who actually use them. And I think that shift is going to happen. I think that will have spillover. I hope it will into the traditional aids. And I think that could be the biggest benefit we get, innovation and what people have been calling for a few years now is the consumer-centered hearing loss professional who keeps in mind when they bring somebody in that the consumer is the center of what they're selling. It's not the device that they're selling that's the center of what they're doing. It's the person.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, let me ask one more.
I see Ken's hand is raised. I don't know if that's a new question.
Pardon? I'm sorry, Judy, repeat that, please.
I see Ken's hand is raised. Is that a new question, Ken, I assume?
No, I forgot to put my hand down. Sorry, guys.
Okay. I'm wondering whether, you could do a little prognosticating, particularly with respect to the impact of OTC hearing aids on the audiology profession. You mentioned earlier, and again, with respect to our next presenter, our December 4th program, that Gail Lynn, was amenable, to basically servicing people buying OTC hearing aids. And it does occur to me that whether people realize it or not, they are probably going to want some help at some point along the line. It's not an easy process. And each individual's needs and types and requirement, types of hearing loss and level of hearing loss differ. And I'm wondering, whether you can prognosticate on what the effects of OTC hearing aids is likely to be on the audiology profession. Are people going to audiologists likely as a group to do what Gail indicates she'll be doing, or are they going to resist? Or some combination of the two, I don't know. Are people going to get their help? The help that they may not know that they need now, but probably will coming down the line as they become involved, with the purchase and use of OTC hearing aids.
So I think it's a mixture. I think some people are going to jump into the market and be ready to help all the way down the line, be ready to unbundle their costs. So if somebody just needs an evaluation, they can pay for that. I think that's going to happen. I think one of the things you have to remember is that there are only approximately, and it's been a couple of years since I've looked at the census on this, but there's only approximately 20,000 dispensers, audiologists, and hearing instrument specialists in the whole country. There are states that Wyoming doesn't have any audiologist in the state. Most of the audiologists tend to be in urban centers because now they're going after an AUD. So now they have their education to make up. So they tend to be there. There are vast parts of the country that just don't have access to audiologists and maybe not even a hearing instrument specialist. So in some ways, I'm hoping it will open up the market. People will be more aware of the possibilities, will be more willing to take steps. First earlier, but also we all know people age into hearing loss. And I'm here to tell you, and this was many years ago now, so I don't know if the statistics still held, but back when I was working at the League for the Hard of Hearing, we had a grant to take a van out to senior centers. And people said, oh, you can do that. They were there, the van was tests for hearing. People say, oh, you can do that, but nobody cares. Nobody cares about their hearing. We had people in long lines to get to those vans. What was depressing was that some of those people had really significant hearing loss that had never been tested before. So if we can raise awareness and say, hey, look, there's an affordable option. There are different ways to treat it. You don't have to just spend $4,000 and $8,000 to get hearing aids. You can find a different way to treat it. Even if we talk about pocket talkers or we talk about different ways to get to it, I think it raises awareness, it makes products, and the more products that are out there, the cost will come down. I believe that tends to be the way the market goes. If you only have, 10 products, it's going to cost more than if you have 100,000 of them. So that's what my hope is. I wouldn't call it prognosticating because I can't tell the future. I'm really incapable of that. But it's some of my guesses and my thoughts and my hopes that the market will get better for people with hearing loss because they'll be more involved and there'll be more of us out there who say, hey, this is what I need.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Now's your chance. Well, Judy, I don't see any. Do you have any concluding remarks?
Just very briefly, Russ, if you ask me to say something, I will. I want to sincerely thank Lise for a terrific presentation and information. I am always, Lise, and I say this sincerely, amazed at all you accomplish with you being the person who does all these things with all these agencies and all these initiatives. So thank you very much for the update and all you do. Quickly also thank very much our captioner, Sabrina. Cart, I didn't see a single word, Sabrina, that seemed misplaced to me. That's a wonderful skill. Thank you. Russ, back to you, and thank you for putting this all together.
Well, thank you, Judy. Let me off. Wendy, you had mentioned, I see in the chat correctly, how do we get a copy of the slide deck? Well, the answer is you all get a copy of the slide deck. You'll also get a transcription, and hopefully you will also get a caption recording. That may take a little while, and I don't want to promise that. We had difficulty with our last program with the putting together a caption recording, and it turned out for some reason, I don't know, the recording that we had in the cloud was corrupted and it didn't work. That's never happened before. We hope, but we don't quite know why it happened last time, so I hope it will not happen again. So you will get that as well. That will take a little bit longer, but you will anticipate, I say you'll get the slide deck, you'll get the transcription, and I hope we'll be able to a little bit later provide a caption recording. Wendy, do you want to say anything by way of conclusion, on behalf of Montgomery County?
No, I don't have anything else to add, but I will still, I'm going to put a reminder about our upcoming chapter event regarding Linda, Linda's upcoming presentation. So thank you for providing. But thank you so much for allowing me a chance to announce our event.
Well, thank you. And let me add my thanks to Sabrina for the captions. They look fine. They look great. And certainly thank you to Lisa. Great presentation. And thank you all for coming. And I guess with that, I guess we'll close for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.